Story time, oh boy, it's story time. Boom, boom, boom. So this is the story about my very first date. First time I ever took a girl out to a restaurant and paid for dinner and all that jazz. Okay? So, this all started when I was back in college a long time ago. There was this girl, and she was really cute. Well, she still is cute, but she was really cute then too. And she was an actress, and she was actually in this play. And about a couple of weeks after I got to see the play, I was walking into the cafeteria, and she happened to be walking up the sidewalk too. And I stopped, and I said, "Oh, hey, how are you doing?" She goes, "Oh, hey," because we'd known each other for a couple of years at that point. And I said, "Hey, I saw you in the play." And she was like, "Oh, really? What'd you think?" I said, "Oh, you were awesome." Um, but I will say, in that second act, because her character was a married woman, right? And so I was like, in that second act, whenever that guy kind of came out on stage that wasn't your husband and started flirting with you, and you were starting to make your character was starting to make cow eyes at him, I was like, oh no, don't you do it. Don't you do it, don't you do it. And then whenever y'all walked off stage together, and I was like, oh no, don't you do it. Come on now, don't you do it. And then when he walked back out on stage after the lights went out and came back up, and he was straightening his coat, and you walk out with this like dazed look on your face, and your clothes all disheveled, and your hair akimbo. I was just thinking, oh, you slut. Now, just to make sure this is clear, it is never, ever, ever a good idea to tell a girl that you're interested in that you thought she was a slut, even if she was pretending to be one in a play. Probably not a good idea. This was one of those one out of a million times that the girl actually thought that was funny, which is a miracle in and of itself. So after she laughed for a couple of minutes, I was like, "So you're going into the cafeteria? Are you meeting anybody for lunch?" And she was like, "No." I said, "Well, might I dine with you today?" And I said it in that weird, fancy way because I'm a dork. And she was like, "Oh, perchance you might today," because she's an actress and she was cool. So we went in and we had lunch and we talked for a long time, probably like 2 hours. It was ridiculous. We were talking about movies and TV and classes and music, and it was just great. And finally, I was like, some of these movies we've talked about that you like, I've never seen any of these before. We should do like a movie night. We can watch some of these movies. And she was like, "Oh, that would be awesome." And I was like, I think we're friends on Facebook. Why don't I message you maybe tomorrow and we can set up a movie night? And she said, "That sounds great." And she left. And I was like, a girl just gave me permission to message her to go and do something like an activity. This had never happened before. And I was like, oh, this is awesome. So I went straight back to my dorm room. And for those of y'all who don't know how a lot of college dorm rooms work, and everyone's a little bit different, but the way ours worked was where you got into your room, and you were in this little itty bitty room about the size of a cracker box, and there'd be a set of bunk beds. You'd go into this door to the bathroom, and there'd be this other door inside the bathroom that if you went through, you'd be in another person's dorm room. And those people weren't your roommates; they were your suite mates, right? Because you were in a little suite, and your two rooms were connected by a bathroom. Well, in that other room was my best friend. He lived in the suite with me, and then we were roommates after college for a long time. We're still best friends. I went in, I had to tell him. I was like, "You won't believe this," and I told him everything that happened about the movie night and everything. He was like, "Oh, dude, that's awesome." So she gave you her phone number, and I was like, "No," because you didn't get her phone number. What was that? No, I didn't know that was expected. He takes my phone out of my hand and then proceeds to message this girl pretending to be me. I wasn't happy with this at the time. He messages her and he just says, "Hey, how you doing? So about this movie night, should we do it tomorrow?" She responds with, "Yeah, that sounds great." He then says, "Awesome. How about dinner beforehand?" And she was like, "That sounds great. What did you have in mind?" I begin to freak out. I'm jumping on his roommate's bed. I'm just completely going crazy because this has never happened before. Um, And so I'm like, and he goes, and I said, well, should I ask if she wants to go to the calf or maybe to the little sandwich shop underneath the student center? He goes, man, you're hopeless. So he texts her, what's your favorite type of restaurant? And she says, well, I like Mexican food, I like Italian food, I like lots of different stuff. He goes, well, great, I'll just surprise you, which was a surprise to me too. And she says, all right. And he goes, great. I will pick you up outside of your dorm at 6 o'clock tomorrow. She says, can't wait. And he says, there you go, handing my phone back to me. And I look at him and I say, what have you just done to me? He goes, man, you will thank me later. I said, oh, really? I'll thank you later. You've just created this date with this girl that I like, in which the plans are that I am to pick this girl up at her dorm tomorrow at 6 and then to drive her to a restaurant off campus for dinner. He goes, yeah, what's the problem? I said, I'll tell you what the problem is. Problem number one, I don't have a car. Problem number two, I don't have a driver's license. Little side note, didn't have a driver's license because I didn't have a car. I was 22, 23 years old. I didn't have a driver's license because I didn't have a car. So what was the point of tripling my family's car insurance bill if I wasn't going to have a car to be able to drive anyway? He was like, well, dude, don't you worry. You can borrow my car. I'm like, great. So problem number one is solved, but there's still a big old problem with number two. He says, well, you're 23? I'm like, yeah. He goes, so you got a learner's permit? Yeah. And he goes, and so a learner's permit, you can legally drive as long as you have another licensed driver in the car that's over 21. I'm like, yeah. And he goes, how old is she? I said, I think only like a year younger than me, like 22. He goes, well, then you're fine. She'll be your licensed driver. I said, so you mean to tell me that I'm going to take this girl out on a date and she's going to be my licensed driver in the car so I can legally drive with a learner's permit? He goes, there you go. I'm like, well, should I tell her? He goes, heck no. He goes, man, you'll only be driving illegally for the 500 yards from where I park my car to where her dorm building is. I'm like, this might actually could work. So the next day, I show up in my nice, like, flannel looking button down shirt because, that's how guys dressed for dates. Had on my jeans and my Vans and nice little lightweight windbreaker jacket with a little pop collar thing. I was looking good. Didn't look like me at all, so I was looking good. And I pick her up and we go to a restaurant and it's great. Don't get me wrong, the date itself was actually wonderful. She's a fantastic person. Bring her back to my dorm, and I sign her in to my dorm, which I had never done before. Now you have to understand, I didn't go to one of those co-ed dormitory type of colleges. We had the separation of the different sexes. The guys had their buildings, and the girls had their buildings, and you weren't allowed to have somebody of the opposite sex come into your dorm room unless it was on specifically designated nights. And on those nights, you had to go to the common area, and there would be an RA on duty, and you had to sign that person in and put down your room number, and that person had to leave their ID, and you had to leave by 11 o'clock. And so this was like a Thursday night or something, and so she had to give her ID and everything. This was the first time I'd ever done it. I was a freaking senior, and I'd never had a girl sign into my room before. It was fantastic. We watched like The Dark Knight or something. It's just great. When the movie's done, I walk her back to her dorm room, and I was really, really scared. I was like, I don't know if I should kiss her because I might be a little too forward, and I mean, there might be people watching, and so I was like, so I gave her a hug. I loved it. It was great. I wasn't a hugger before that, and that made me a hugger, and I was like, oh, I could do this is great, and so I hug her good night, and I hold the door. She goes in, and I skippity skip right on back to my dorm, and I'm grinning like a possum eating corn, and it's just great. The next day I get up, I go to a couple of my classes that I have Friday morning, and usually me and my best friend, we would always meet up for lunch on like Monday, Wednesday, Fridays because our schedules happen to line up that way. So I'm sitting in the cab and I've got myself my lunch and I'm eating and I'm still happy. And my roommate, my sweet mate, he comes up to my table. He goes, "So how was the date last night?" And I said, "Oh man, it was awesome." He goes, "Uh huh, it was awesome, huh? Had you a little distracted, huh?" And I'm like, what's the problem? He goes, "Dude, you parked my car in an illegal spot and I got a ticket on my windshield this morning." He was a little ticked at me for the rest of the day. As a matter of fact, this has been, my gosh, 7, 8 years ago. And he'll still remind me of the one parking ticket he got in 4 years of college was because I borrowed his car for that date. However, he's the one who made the date in the first place. So when I think back on it, and I think back on how that was my first ever real date with a girl, and I had a great time, and I think back on whether or not it was worth it for him to get that parking ticket, I can't help but think, yeah, it was totally worth it.
Story time, oh boy, it's story time. Boom, 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 story time, story time.